to... Hi everyone, this is Corey from Path of Friendship, and welcome to Pause and Reflect, a show that's going to help us get closer and more deeply connected to our dogs. The thing that we really want to do anyway. I mean, that's why we have our dogs anyway. This here's Bodhi. You'll get to meet all my dogs as the show goes on. This one is Bodhi here, and behind me here, this little guy, this is Cecil. Bodhi's how old are you now, Bo? 4 years old. He's a pit hound mix that I rescued about 3 years ago. And Cecil is a Shih Tzu mix that I rescued, 9 years ago. Yeah, just turned 10, 9 years ago. And these are my guys here. So, I'm going to introduce myself. As I mentioned, I'm Corey, and I've been working with dogs and really human-dog relationships for the past 35 plus years, really professionally since 1984. But even before that, I grew up in the house with dogs, and my parents were very involved with dogs, and just my whole career path has been dog related and as well as mindfulness related. And we're going to get into some mindfulness stuff as well, which is really the same level of connection that our dogs have, the same perception of reality that our dogs have. And that's the pause part. So we're going to start first with a pause. And one of the best ways to connect and to deepen our friendship and deepen our relationship with our dog is to make sure that we are basically on the same channel. Now, as human beings, we tend to really not live so much right now. I mean, our awareness about what's happening now is pale in comparison to our vivid memories and our vivid predictions of what's going to happen. So throughout the day, we spend most of our time in our minds, up in our heads, thinking about what's going to happen later, what I should have done earlier. We're always thinking ahead and the past. And that's been very useful for us for survival, because we can learn from the past and predict how to respond that way in the future. But what happens is we've taken it to the point where that tool, that ability, instead of using it for us, it's begun to use us, and we become used by it. So we tend to forget the ground beneath our feet and the air and the sunlight on our skin and the very things that are happening right now in this moment. And that's one of the reasons why we're as human beings, we're so connected to our dogs, because our dogs are quite the opposite. Our dogs have powers of prediction and powers of memory, just like we do, maybe not as great, but their spotlight, their attention is focused mostly on now. So as we have this vast in the past and this vast in the future and this narrow band in the present, dogs are the opposite. They have this vast in the past, this narrow in the past, narrow in the future, and this vast in the present. And so we really are complementary. Our mindsets, our ways of being are complementary to each other. And if we are to really connect with our dogs, what we want to do is we want to be able to join them in their world, kind of like tuning into the same channel as they are. You know, if we're in the past and the future and they're in the present, we're watching 2 different shows. So to get to them to really connect, we must be on the same level. Because if I'm here and my dog's here, we'll never connect. It's only when we're equal in our perceptions and our conception of the way things are is when we can be equal and really connect more at that point. Now, we can never be exact, but we can try to do this, which is, by the way, one of the reasons that, along with studying dogs and the human-dog relationship, I studied mindfulness, because that mindfulness really is very close to the way our dogs are experiencing the world. And we have to join them in that experiential domain. So those of you who are not familiar with mindfulness, it really is no big deal. I mean, there's been so much written on it and so much talked about it, and it's a centuries upon centuries old practice in almost every culture and almost every religion. Every philosophy has some form. I mean, it's most closely associated with Buddhism and Zen, but They really don't have the key, they're not the ones that own that. It's been across the board in Islam and Judaism and Christianity and in all different types of different cultures and religions. Mindfulness has been there, and a lot of different methods of that. But we can strip all that away because none of that is really necessary. All mindfulness is just being aware and focused of everything that's happening now. It's not about taking our minds and bringing it to another plane of existence or another plane of consciousness. Those are different things, and they're fine, but they're not what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is just being aware of the present. Sounds simple. It is easier said than done. Our dogs are experts at it, but we need to work a little bit more on it so we can join our dogs in it. So every time we have this show, we're going to take a moment to pause and connect with our dogs on a mindful level in the beginning. And one way to do that is to first connect with ourselves. And most practices of mindfulness have us pay attention sort of to an anchor point of connection. And usually that's our breath, breathing, because it's something that we always do, obviously. It's something that we have some control over. I can hold my breath or breathe faster if I want to. Yet when we're not controlling it, it happens automatically. So that's kind of been known as sort of the swinging door between the automatic and what's in control. So paying attention to our breath is a really great way to anchor us into mindfulness. And all it really means is just be aware of the sensation of breathing. So all you have to do is sit. You don't have to sit in a pretzel position. You don't have to sit with candle. You can do that. You can set up little shrines. You can do this, but you can even do it standing. One of my favorite places to practice mindfulness is standing in the grocery store line. Not these days with the pandemic and the social distancing, but you all remember you stand behind a long line and you're late for something, and the guy in front of you has 1 million items and you have 3, and then they decide to write a check and they can't find their ID, and those are wonderful times. Those are wonderful situations to practice mindfulness in. But all it really matters is just to pay attention to our breath. So let's take a moment to just do that now. Let's just breathe in and breathe out and just notice how it feels. Notice how your breath feels in your body. We're not here to judge it. We're not here to say our breath is good, our breath is not good, it's too long, it's too short. I don't like the way something smells, I don't like the way something sounds. None of that matters. That's gone. We're just going to focus on just the sensation of breathing. So let's take a moment of just sitting and just feeling our breath, either how it feels in the rise and fall of our bellies or how it feels coming in and out of our nose. Just breathe. Eyes open or closed. You can close your eyes too. And it's just a matter of, I don't want to make it sound more complicated than it is. It's so simple that, the easiest things sometimes are the hardest things to grasp. It's just focusing on the feelings, just focusing on paying attention to the feelings. Now, when you do that, you'll notice that other things will come into play, thoughts and sounds and all kinds of stuff. We'll get to that stuff later. But just for a moment, you focus on your breath, and that's a great anchor to practice mindfulness. When it comes to practicing it with our dogs, when it comes to sharing this moment, and really our relationship with our dogs are wonderful when we can share these moments together on the same page or on the same wavelength, if you will. We can actually take that moment to, instead of using our breath, or in addition to using our breath as an anchor, we can use how our dogs feel beneath our palms and how their fur feels and their muscles feel and their bones feel, and that actual sensation of petting them, the different heats that we feel. If we just focus on that, that's a moment of connection and a moment of mindfulness that we can share with our dogs, because while we're doing that, guess what they're feeling? They're feeling our hands on them. So we're really connecting in that way. It's not this sort of mindlessly petting them while checking our watches or looking at our phones or watching TV or engaged in something. Those are fine, but those are not connective moments. We happen to be together, but we're not connecting. Here, we're turning off everything and we're just feeling how our dogs feel. Because being with them, being connected with them is really what we all want in the first place. I don't know anybody who ever decided to share their part of their life with a dog, invest the time and the emotion and the money to say, it'd be nice as an accessory to have. Yeah, there are those who do that. But most people, when they decide to share their life with a dog, really want that connection. We really want that that companionship. And the only way to really get that is by going on that same level. And one way of doing that is sharing these mindful moments with them. So when we pause and we share this moment, then we are really engaging with each other on the same playing field, watching the same channel, if you will. So let's take one more moment and just pet them. And very slowly, when we do this, I had a teacher once say, pet them slow enough that you can count every strand of fur beneath your hand. Now, obviously, that's not a realistic thing, but the idea is that we want to pay such attention and go slow enough and really focus on it that we're not just glossing over it, we're really getting into the details of it. And that's the connection right there. So every time we meet, we're going to take a moment in the beginning to pause. To pause with our friends, to connect with our friends. Now, when we get dogs, most of the time we get dogs with the intention, as I mentioned, of having a connection and having a friend. A lot of times what happens is things get in the way of that. Whether their behavior gets in the way or our behavior gets in the way, or it doesn't kind of work out exactly as planned, and there becomes this friction, this thing that happens between us. And dealing with that kind of thing for all these years, I've seen many relationships that were really solid, but there was just that one little splinter of something that kind of got in the way. And unfortunately, a lot of times what we end up doing is we end up making that the cure for that worse than the problem itself. We end up trying to get to control. And control, the mantra for many years with dogs is control, control, control. And there's been many different styles of control. There's the dominance intimidation style. There's the behaviorist motivation, positive motivation style. There's been all these different fads, just like fads come and go, fashions come and go. There's been fashions in this as well. The bottom line is they're pretty much all, in a way, the same, even though the methods are different. The same thing that happens is that we're trying to control them. And once we get into that point of trying to control our dogs, having that sort of hierarchy where we're in charge and they're beneath us, we've lost the friendship. We can't be friends on a same level if one is boss and the other is subservient. I don't care how you get that way. I don't care if you get that way through being mean and punishment, or you get that way through loving and rewarding them. Because anytime you have that type of relationship where you'd say this what must be happening and you must respond, and it's a one-directional relationship from us on top, dogs on the bottom, there is no friendship there. It quite often becomes a business transaction. It's a transactional relationship, and that's not what I want with our dogs, and that's not what we all really wanted to get. We didn't set up saying, I need something in my life to control. I have no control the rest of my life. Let me get something to control. Let me get a dog. Hey, I'm sure there are a few people who have said that, but that's not what we're doing. So what we need to do is, what we want to do is get that level of equality. So that's a big thing here, equality. How many people feel equal to their dogs? When I say that, and I give workshops and lectures and classes and even my private practice, when I talk about we have to be equal, I get everything from sort of blank stares to laughter. But the truth is, the equality is what makes us friends. The path of friendship is what I've created, and the sort of the tagline is, love them like family, treat them like friends. And everybody says my dog is family, 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 and I agree. My dog is friend, friend, I agree. But these are not just words that I throw out there. I have very specific ideas behind these words, and a lot of what we're going to do in these shows is really dive into those meanings of it. Because quite often we say one thing, and yet we do something different. So love them like family. Well, what I really mean with that is to understand the connections that we have, the interconnectedness that we have with our dogs, with all life, really. This show is going to focus on our dogs, but it really applies to everything. But there is this sort of interwoven connectedness. We as humans tend to feel isolated and separate. The poet Hausman said it best when he said, I, a stranger and afraid, in a world I never made. And that tends to be the attitude of a lot of us, that we're sort of these vulnerable, isolated beings sealed off from everything else, that we have to control things in order to survive. And that's so far from the truth. We can't isolate ourselves out. We can't take ourselves away from the equation and be separate. The idea of the rugged individualist doesn't exist. Because if you're an individualist, then why do you need air? Why do you need sunlight? Why do you need food? You do. You're connected to everything else. And that interconnectedness is an idea in Buddhism, or as Thich Nhat Hanh says, interbeing. We can't separate ourselves from it. And when we're talking about our dogs here, that is the family that we're a part of. We are not more important than them, and they're not more important than us. We are different. Yes, we're absolutely different, yet we're equal in importance. To give you an example of that is ourselves, our own bodies. We're not one sort of unified thing. I have a heart, I have lungs, I have a stomach, I have a brain, although some people may dispute that. I have different organs in my body. Is any one more important than the other? Is my heart more important than my lungs? Okay, take out my lungs, what would happen? The heart would stop. Take out my heart, what would happen? The lungs would stop. They're different. They have different functions, yet they're equally important, and they're integrated into each other. They're part of each other. They need each other. And that is what we have with our dogs. It's known in Buddhism Indra's net, where Indra's net was one little jewel in that net reflected everything else in the universe. And if we see our dogs and ourselves is that in that interconnected way, that becomes our family. And what does that mean? How does that translate into our daily life? It translates into that we don't dispose of them if we don't like them. We're committed to them. And that's key. How can we be friends if we're committed? We don't take them on a trial basis, say, well, if I don't like you, I'll dump you and get a new one. I've come across that, and I'm sure you know people who have done that too. But loving them like family means understanding that interconnectedness that we have, and that commitment that we have to each other. Now, treat them like friends, well, to me, friendship is a verb. Friendship is what we do, it's not what we say. So, I base everything I do with my dogs as how I would deal with my human friends. Which means I wouldn't threaten my human friends with punishment if they didn't do something. Nor would I bribe my human friends to get them to do something. I respect them. I give them their dignity. Well, I don't give it to them. I don't get in the way of it. And I get it in return. My dogs and I trust each other. We respect what's important to each other. We share our ideas. We work out problems together. I don't train my friends. Yet, we learn to cooperate and collaborate with each other. And that's the difference, and that's what's missing. And when there are problems in a relationship with our dogs, so often, it's just a knee-jerk reaction, and that's part of our culture is, got to train them, call a trainer, get this fixed, fix it. Use the positive way or use the negative way. The truth is, and we'll explore this in other shows, they're all in a way negative, because all that does is separate us. It puts us here and them down here. It creates that distance and that barrier. That's all it does. So, our dogs are our friends. Now you may think, well, maybe that's just language, maybe that's just a word, right? What's the difference between the word friend and the word pet? Well, it's more than just semantics. I think there's a huge difference in that. Words are very, very powerful. What I call my dog, if I call him my pet, that means I own him. He's my property, he's an object. And of course I'll feel that way and I'll treat him as such. If I call him my friend, there's a more respect and more of an equal level. That's what we need to focus on. And this is not just, again, semantics. This is, you could call it linguistic determinism or linguistic relativity, the Sapir-Whorf definition of that. Our words really define how we think. Our words really alter how we think. So if I think of my dog as a pet, an object, or even a child, or a tool, then I'm going to treat him as such. It's going to come out in my thinking and change my thought processes. But if I think of him as my friend, as my equal, then that's going to change it as well. And that's what they deserve. They are, if they're to be true friends with us, we have to do it on an equal level. We can't do it in a hierarchical way. And I know that's counter to a lot of what has been heard, but that is very true. We don't own them. Ownership is manufactured. See, friendship is natural. Friendship is it's organic. It grows from the inside out, and that's what we need to do. Ownership is manufactured. It's built. It's manipulated. When we do all these different training things, we're manipulating, we're controlling, we're changing who they are. And if we don't accept our dogs for who they are, then why have them in the first place? So part of this is to learn to love them and live with them in a way that we respect each other, we trust each other, we work things out together, and we don't judge each other on that. Unconditional love is a two-way street. It's not just one way. We've heard all the times our dogs love us without conditions. Well, we need to do it to them as well. Now that doesn't mean, and I know you're saying, well, I'm going to let my dog run amok. First of all, that's a presumption that's really not based on any kind of fact or an assumption. And about assume, don't make an ass out of you and me with assume. Our dogs are not just run amok. We can work things out. We can have wonderful relationships with our dogs without us always being in charge. We can share that role depending on what we're doing. And again, we'll as the show continues, we're going to be talking much more detail about all of that. So you can have, in a way, your cake and eat it too, but you're doing it in a way that really connects us so integratedly, that family connection of, it's in our DNA. We're sharing that same interbeing that we always have. So words matter. Ideas matter. So we need to start thinking of our dogs as friends, and we need to start getting onto their level with them. Every show that we do, I'm going to have there's a quick segment on just either a book, or I may even have a interview, or just something that I've read that you can do it. And there's an idea of having horizontal relationships versus vertical, as we were talking about. Vertical is I'm on top, dog's on the bottom. Horizontal, we're on the equal plane. And that's known as psychosocial accompaniment. Dr. Mary Watkins. And if you can see, this is her latest book here, Dr. Mary Watkins. And she speaks about it not just from an animal standpoint, but from human to human standpoint. But it really it's a very important read, and I recommend it highly. And I think it's really the way of, though this book is not about obviously dogs, but it's about relationships, and this relationship that we have with our dogs needs to have that sort of accompaniment, that horizontal relationship where we are equals with each other, and not equals all the time. right? My heart sometimes will have to beat faster to help my lungs, and I'll have to breathe sometimes heavier if I'm doing a lot of hiking to help my heart and to help my stomach. We share these roles, but yet that idea of that same level, same importance is always there, and that's what we need to do with our dogs here. So let me give us one thing that we're going to reflect on, because this is pause from the beginning and reflect. We're going to reflect now, and this is what I want you to take away from this. How do you feel about your dog? Is your dog your friend? Is your dog your pet? Is your dog your family? Is your dog a tool? Something just to use to get something? That happens as well. And remember, it's not just semantics. I remember rather recently, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, who I don't agree with all the time. I have to say, I think certain things they do are not where I would do, and I disagree. But there was one point that they made that I did agree with, and that is calling our dogs pets or well, I don't think they called them friends, but they had something on what we call our dogs. And I think they're spot on, at least on that point, because words have power, and they have power to alter our thoughts. So the takeaway for today, what I want you to reflect on today's reflection is, how do you feel about your dog? Is your dog your friend? And if they are you acting that way? Or are you in a constant state of cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance means we say, well, my dog's my friend. We say one way, but yet we act a different way. We act a way, we manipulate them, or we threaten them, or we lock them in cages, or we do things that we would never in a million years do with our friends if we were truly friends. So are we just calling them friends by name and acting differently? Or can we somehow get these aligned? And the fear is, if we don't do these things, what will happen? Will our dogs be crazy? Will we end up with dogs tearing our furniture apart or being aggressive or horrible? The truth is no, and you'll see how, without having to go into pulling the puppet strings or cracking the whip all the time, or manipulating with bribes or coercions. None of that stuff is necessary when you have the kind of relationship that we're shooting for here. And that relationship, by the way, is the most natural relationship in the world. We got lost somewhere, but we've all done it. If we've had dogs, or we've seen children with dogs, they know that instinctively, intuitively. It's there, and it's still in us. We just buried over and over and over with so much information that is just not necessary, because it's all fear-based, must control. Well, path of friendship is more of having faith in each other. And that's not about fear. That's about trust and faith in each other. And that kind of relationship, being friends, that's what we can absolutely have. We just have to peel away some of the stuff that we've learned. So reflect on today. How do you feel about your dog? What do you call them? Are they your friend? Are they your pet? Are they a tool? Are they your child? And if they are your friend, and you really feel if they're your friend, are you acting as a friend? Because if Ralph Waldo Emerson said, to have a friend, we must be a friend. And so we're going to be exploring that a lot more. So take a moment every day to pause with your dog and just connect. And today let's reflect on, are we friends? And are we really acting that way? So until next time, I will see you on Pause and Reflect. I'm Corey Cohen from Path of Friendship. Have a great day.